Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Mimic from 1997. So, I like to always go on and compare movies. So I feel like Mimic, to me, immediately feels like Chud or Jeepers Creepers, or I would probably go on and compare this to, like, the concept being similar to the Deep Blue Sea, where, of course, in the Deep Blue Sea, we would have the scientists who were making the sharks smarter to try to cure some illness down the road, and come to find out that would not help them when the fact that they would get trapped with these sharks in this environment and at some point get eaten, sadly enough. So, and for Mimic, it feels similar because, of course, we have them bring in bugs to wipe out another bug, but they have to go on and enhance this bug to take out this other bug. So at some point they don't pay any much further attention to just naturally assume, oh yeah, like this bug is gonna have a very short shelf life and it'll be fine, and then come to find out it massively evolves to where it's an unexpected thing, and they're like, oh my god, we didn't know. So, but yeah, but that would be my comparison to this movie. So, now, of course, we have to go on and just kind of just talk about this movie. Uh, Surprisingly, like, I can understand if this movie was to get remade today, simply because this is another kind of like pandemic kind of movie, and you know how, like, bizarrely right now they just love to do those just pandemic films. They just love to go on and just do these kinds of movies. And so uh right out of the gate, I'm going to go on and just kind of like say I don't feel that this movie holds up. I think that this movie is too small, and I really think that a lot of this movie is, hey, here is this gross bug, here you go. Like, here is this goop that you're gonna see in this movie. Ooh, wow. Like, we spend a lot of time on trying to gross people out in this movie than giving a good story. And I obviously don't think that we end up showing, like, the actual monster stuff. I don't think we end up showing it enough, or I don't think we ended up showing it clearly to where I'm like, okay, like, you're telling me, like, this guy's getting attacked. I can't really tell, but okay, I'll take your word for it. It's kind of that kind of movie. And I'm like, man, this movie is so weak. Uh, but I liked, like, the idea of it. Like, there was something about it where it's like, yeah, finally, like, something is trying to become a a equal to the human race, where it's deciding, like, hey, we're gonna try to take uh the humans on and trying to, like, combat them. And so nature has decided to create its own champion against the human race to try to take them down a notch. So, so yeah. Uh, so teeing it up, what is this movie about? So, come to find out, we have this illness called the Strickler's disease, and this is to come into the fold to start making a number of kids all sick. And I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into spoilers. Like, I'm trying to, like, more than likely I just said Strickler's disease because more than likely I'll probably forget what the name is within a minute or two. So we have Susan Tyler that comes in and is to be the go-to scientist to save the day, as if Susan uh, or Mira Sorvina hasn't gone on and been a scientist in a number of other films. Has anybody gone on and ever seen the Val Kilmer movie The Saint? She ends up playing a scientist in that movie also. Like, all she does is she ends up either playing like an assassin or a scientist. Like, has anybody see her play anybody different? I haven't. So, but so Susan is to come in and save the day, and it seems everybody's like, wow, this bug expert, man, luckily for her, she helped everyone. She saved us. So we then have some time passing, and we go on to have this monstrous creature that is starting to grab people and to start to kill them or collect them without anybody really knowing. So, come to find out, this movie focuses on the CDC, which I'm sure out of all the acronyms of FBI's and CIA's and all that jazz, like, I'm sure the CDC has got to be the most, uh, like, just like banging like department, right? Like the most like attractive looking and like the most cool, and like as if they're gonna walk away from an explosion and I'm like, yeah, yeah. They're the most attractive bunch, right, out of everybody. So like we should of course have the like supermodel freaking CDC characters, right? So we start to go on and have Josh Brolin be this police officer that's rolling in Dr. Peter Mann, who is to be the CDC guy, to let him know that there seems to be a yellow fever case. And so they are to go on and look into it. And Susan is to look into that. Uh, she is to find two kids bring her this box filled with these butterflies, but then also this unusual insect where Susan is to look into it and realize, wait a minute, like something happened here. Like something wrong happened here. And like at some point I need to go on and show this to somebody, but hopefully like my lights don't turn off and the booger man comes in here and steals my one and only specimen, because heaven forbid I can go anywhere and try to figure out where another specimen would be. So we are to re-meet up with these kids to figure out where they had gotten this bug. And so Susan is to now go on and ask these kids, like, well, hey, like, have you seen this kind of cocoon looking thing? And they're like, oh, no, we haven't seen anything like that. But hey, like, what can we get if we go on and find something like that? And so we have these kids who kind of endanger themselves to look for this item. I'm like, no, kids, like, just, like, there's obviously something going on here, and like we of course have to have these kids that are like, oh yeah, like we just desperately need this money. So, and I'm assuming they're gonna end up dead because of it, because why shouldn't they, in all honesty? Sadly enough, sorry kids. But so we have Susan, Dr. Peter Mann, and a random cop and a random shoe polisher all end up stuck nearby this broken down old subway station. And to me, this kind of reminded me so much so of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3. Like it feels like they just kind of stole that kind of set piece from that movie. slash live action show, and I was just like, oh my god, like this looks like that same kind of set. But I could be wrong. But so we have at some point where they are to try to figure out how to disguise themselves to seem like these bugs so they can try to get away. But them trying to get away is to also just have them uh, try to figure out how they can technically just uh, like figure out a way to get the subway that is broken down to get rolling, and for them to figure out a way to uh, escape, go on to kill everything off, and really the way that this movie ends is really just similar to the movie Chud. The cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller. So much about this movie was to be so much similar to the movie Chud. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go on. And what is my grading of this movie? Yeah, this movie just doesn't hold up. I would go on and sadly say that Mimic is just a straight up bad movie. It nowhere has story that is to fascinate me or have me really hooked into it. Uh, there was a whole lot of sciencey jargon just jumbled around where I'm like, meh, like I could do without that. I get people are smart in this movie, but like the more and more I'm just hearing like more sciencey jargon, the more I'm just like, man, like if you guys can just give me one character who is to go on and be like, what? Like I didn't understand. Can you break that down to me in layman's terms? Because like I feel like every smart character in a film, we also have to have the really dumb character, and like to re put together that cliche. So it's a bad movie, but I'm sure people will, regardless, be like, but it's a Guillermo del Toro movie. And people would go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like maybe the sequels are better. Because for some reason, this movie had a franchise to it. Not quite sure why, but when really looking at it now, like the first film was like, yeah, this is pretty weak, some weak sauce. But maybe they were to go on and have like this be like a really cheap film, and man, did they make a killing in the box office. I don't know. But, anyways, I think it's about that time to just go into mention that this movie is available on HBO Max, so it's conveniently able for you to watch. So, more reason for you to go on and say that you've seen this movie. So, with that said, let's go on and go into that double five time territory because it's about that time again. Just going to spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about the time you spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we, of course, have the Strickler's disease. And so it seems that Dr. Peter Mann is bringing in Susan Tyler to help him with his case. And come to find out, if anyone is to go on and survive this disease, they are going to uh, be in a wheelchair or uh, possibly not be able to walk for the rest of their lives. Any of the kids who survive, but most of the kids will end up dead. So Peter Mann is going on desperately hoping Susan has some answer, some cure. And so it seems that Susan is to find out that the way the illness is to get spread is by these cockroaches. And so Susan is telling everybody that they're going to bring in these Judas's insects to then wipe out the cockroaches, which will also wipe out this illness. And so everybody's like, oh, we're saved. Thanks, Susan, for giving us this answer somehow. And so, after it seems the dust is settled and they are to have gotten their 15 minutes and they have saved the world from a city, they really just saved the city and that was it. So, we now have, of course, Dr. Peter Mann stating that he ended up falling in love with Susan as they were working on this case together. So it seems now we turn around and have this couple in love, so much so that they are wanting to try and have a baby. The thing of it is when we go on and have these characters do this pregnancy test, it comes out negative, and so Peter ends up turning to Susan and is like, well, hey, we can try again. So, anyways, let's kind of go on into this film here. So, at one point, we of course have a priest, who is running to his rooftop, and he is to try and slam this door behind him, hoping whatever is behind him is not going to break through this door. And the preacher is to be scrambling, where can I go, what can I do? And this thing is breaking through this door. We have this priest who ends up jumping to fall on this like this painter like scaffold kind of thing, or this painter kind of swinging thing. So the preach touches this, but then it seems that he is starting to slip and fall, and when you know it, he ends up falling and smacking his head onto this this paint can, and he dies from the impact. So we have Chewie, who is watching on as a character that is to be called Long John in this movie, but Chewie ends up calling Funny Shoes, and I honestly think that should have been the name of the character. They should have called him just Funny Shoes, because that would have been funny. So, Chewie goes on and is to immediately know that the preacher is to be wearing these certain kind of shoes, but then also the monster dragging him along is to be wearing funny shoes. So it seems that Chewie is to not really understand what's really going on here, because all that really matters to him is the shoes of which that people wear. So we come to find out that Josh Brolin's character, who is just named Josh in this film, is to call Peter Mann in, Dr. Peter Mann, to have a case of yellow fever that he is to try and solve here, as it seems that there is unusual amounts of feces that are on these walls, and like unusual amounts of things here that would kind of showcase to us that more than likely the Long John had been here, but these characters don't know that. These characters don't understand that. So they immediately write it off as a yellow fever incident. That's what Josh says. And so that is to really, like, this whole scene is just to kind of set up Josh's character that will go on to be helping them out when they, of course, are to go to the subway station, because we have Leon, who is going to become a very difficult cop that is to want all these permits and want all these red tape things to be done before it seems that both Peter and Susan can go on and start to do their investigation. So we have these two kids going on and seeing Susan to try to sell her a bunch of dead butterflies, it seems. So, but they also have some other bug also. And so Susan is to force the kids to try and name all of these butterflies, but then also they are to say it's like, well, we have this mystery bug in this box, and so we're gonna try to see if we can get a lot more money out of her for this bug. And so they end up brokering a deal. Susan ends up taking the bug, and she then realizes it's like, oh my god, like this is the Judas's bug that uh that seems to have evolved well past what it should have, and it seems to have a lot more lifespan and so on and so forth. Oh my god, something has gone horribly awry here. So Susan is at some point to go on and talk to Dr. Gates about this mistake of which that had happened, that she, I guess, had underestimated the advances that they would make into this Judas insect. And so at some point, Susan is turning to Dr. Gates to say, it's like, well, should I have gone on and done this? And Dr. Gates is like, well, of course you should have, because it makes all the sense in the world for you to have gone on and used this insect to wipe out this cockroach, because like it saved like a ton of lives. It saved lives from possibly my grandchildren, and like we would all be grateful for that. So Susan is to also, after it seems she is to have looked in to this insect and trying to want to go on and dissect it, it seems that this insect has this way about it that it ends up killing itself. Like it cyanides itself, bizarrely. And so Susan's like, okay, that's also unusual. So Susan is to try to figure out as much information she can on this bug, but all of a sudden her lab ends up going dark, and she's trying to figure out, okay, where is this bug? I'm trying to find it. It seems that Long John ends up appearing into this lab, stealing the specimen back, and Susan ends up losing the bug. And when Susan is trying to talk to Peter about it, Peter's like, well, like, I'm sorry that you have lost this bug, and so, like, now you have nothing to really show me, but you're kind of telling me this, so I have to just take your word for it. So, Peter and Susan go on to find the kids to ask them, it's like, okay, like, where did you go on and find this bug initially so we can find it again? So that leads them to this subway station. So Peter and Susan are go on and talk to the kids about there being a possible like cocoon or nest kind of thing for them to possibly find, of which that they do, and they end up getting grabbed for it afterwards. Because what a mistake they had made. So, because they're going after like these insects, and of course, like someone's going to go on and grab them, which of course is Long John. We also end up having Chewie, who ends up getting nabbed, as it seems he is to be thinking about the funny shoes, and so uh, we have Chewie who's speaking to his possible father, Danny or Manny, Manny. And Manny is going on and telling Chewie that this uh, this place might have had a Jesus symbol on it at one point, might have been a church, but right now this place is to not be safe because the CDC is looking into it. So Chewie goes in there after dark to then end up getting scooped up by the Long John. He ends up not getting killed, but it seems that Chewie is just kind of hiding out. And it seems in the later part of the movie we have Susan and slash Manny who end up finding him much later in the movie. So now back to Susan, and now back to Peter. So we have Peter that is to bump into this officer named Leon, who seems to be very strict about what he, of course, want these people to do, get all these things and so on and so forth before they can just go on and just do this investigation. And so that at some point leads Peter to bring in Josh, so that way they can, of course, do this investigation. And so we have a girl named Remy who is working with Susan, who is to have, I think, this boyfriend who is to be Jeremy's character, who is Norman Reedus' character, who is to find this pretty good sized insect, and he brings it into Dr. Gates, and is to have Dr. Gates dissect this, and he ends up realizing it's like, oh my god, like, these organs are really developed. Like, this is crazy. Like, the evolution of this bug. And come to find out, Susan will make the same assessment when she ends up slicing and dicing through one of these fully developed Long Johns later. So we have at one point where Susan and Peter, Josh, and Leon end up kind of separating, but then we have Susan who makes her way back into the same kind of area where Pete, Josh, and Leon are, and it seems what happens with her is that Susan, ends up finding Long John, and Long John ends up grabbing Susan and wanting to take her back to where all the other bugs are. So at some point, probably feeding her off. We also had at one point where Susan was to get bitten or kind of stabbed by the smaller bug that she was trying to dissect before. So we have at some point where Susan is to desperately try and kill off this bug by attacking it, because she has this kind of pipe. And so at some point, Susan is to find Peter, Josh, and Leon, and... or no, maybe just Leon and Peter, either way. So she ends up, like, being underneath them, and so they have to go on and, like, throw a belt to her to kind of pull her up. And so what ends up happening is that Peter and Leon end up separating from Josh because they end up falling down because this scaffolding that is to have both Leon and Peter be on ends up breaking. And so Josh is saying, it's like, well, hey, like, where do I go from here? Should I just jump down and help you guys get back up here? Or, like, what should we do? And Peter's like, no, how about you just go back and just find people and have them help? And Josh is like, I don't know where I'm going. And Leon's just like, well, just go this left, right, left, right, 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 left, and you should just get out of here. And so Josh writes this down on his hand. Is like, okay, all right, left, right, left, left, left. And Leon's just like, yeah, just keep going, like, just keep going to the point where, like, you can figure out a way out of here. It should be easy enough. So we have Josh that separates from them, which is to lead me to think this guy's gonna die. So Josh makes his way to find an opening for him to get out of there. And so he ends up taking this sewing machine table and this sewing machine and propping it up so he can jump up to this hole so he can try to get out of here. And he's grabbing this kind of wire. And that, of course, is when the Long John decides to attack Josh. And so when Josh falls with these items, that's when the Long John hears him and it tries to make a quick beeline for Josh. And so Josh again tries to jump up there to get out of this place and try to pull on this wire. And that, of course, is when Long John tries to tear into Josh and kills him, sadly enough. And so Josh is now blood and bleeding and whatever and dead. So Josh dead. Moving on. So when Peter, Leon, and Susan meet up with one another, then of course we have Manny. Manny is to realize that Chewie is to not be up in the morning, and so Manny is to call the police to try and hope that his kid will be found. And so Manny ends up asking this police officer, well, like you're telling me I have a help ticket or something like that. Like, what does this even mean? And so the officers is like, well, I'll call you back in like 2 days, and like we'll see what we can find. So Manny's realizing that these guys are not going to possibly find his kid or even try to. So Manny is going to go on and do his own investigation to naturally assume that Chewie had went on into the building next door, and so Manny can't go on into the uh, the front of this building, so he goes down to the side, and so that leads Manny to meet up with the rest of this group here because he's looking for his son. So now we have all four of these characters together. So, come to find out that all leads them to making their way to this subway because there seems to be the Long John that is chasing after them. And Susan is to try to go on and state, like, yeah, like, this thing is to be, like, something unique. Like, it really tries to mimic what is to look like a human as Susan is to showcase that this thing has these two kind of slits that make it look like it's a human being in disguise, but actually it's a bug. And so, like, it has kind of a mask to it, like how you would go on and see like the Green Goblin from Spider-Man 3, like the James Franco Green Goblin, where like the face for that Green Goblin would kind of pop in and then pop out. It would be kind of that same kind of thing. So, because most of the time, James Franco, you would actually see his face through most of that movie compared to uh, Willem Dafoe's character, where like you would mostly just see him in the mask and no one says no to me and all that kind of stuff. So this leads us to mostly play around with this whole train thing. And so they are trying to desperately go on and close the doors in this train to try to keep this Long John from coming in. And we have this police officer that ends up rapidly shooting the Long John to where it ends up getting kind of cut in half. And so the Long John is to finally say, like, okay, we got to figure out where that other half went to make sure it's dead. So by the time they pull this other half out, we all of a sudden have Leon who ends up getting stabbed in the leg multiple times. To where, of course, now this guy has to worry about him bleeding out from his legs. Sadly enough. So we also had Leon who was with Peter going on and singing this song, and Peter is like, God, this guy is a piece of work. What a piece of shit this guy is. So, we have Leon that is to have fired a number of shots in this thing. It's like, man, like, this isn't so easy for this thing to go down. So, Susan starts to dissect this thing and realizes that it has, like, lungs and all kinds of things. But then she also notices that it has a gland that they can go on and use and disguise uh, themselves as these bugs are starting to smack into this train to want to get in, because of course when we have a guy in this train that is massively bleeding like Leon was until they could figure out how to nurse his wounds, we all of a sudden have the bugs wanting to try to get in because they smell the blood. So Susan is to figure out the gland thing and is to consistently try to put gland all over these guys and just be like, yeah, I know it smells, but here you go. Yeah, I know that you might not think that this is like this is probably gross, but let's just put some gland on you. So these guys are trying to come up with an idea of like, well, hey, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna get out of here? So their master plan is to try to figure out how to make this train work again, because Leon is to come up with a consensus that they can probably go on and turn the power back on here, and every bit of this train and all the stuff attached to it, all of this subway station was made to last. So uh, there's a guarantee that if they just kind of cross some wires and dot the i's and so on and so forth, that this stuff will come back on. So, oh, we also had the scene where this kind of is to showcase this image here. When they were trying to figure out how to kill the cockroaches, we had both Susan and Peter that were going down this sewer system and kind of opening up these little pouches to try to get these insects out to come to go after the cockroaches. And that was the whole little sequence in the beginning of this film. But so the people are trying to figure out or decide like who is to go out there, and Susan's like, "Well, I should go," and Peter's like, "No," because Peter is thinking that Susan is the only one who can like know how to beat this thing. And so Peter is to say, it's like, no, I'll go because you know how to beat this thing. You know how to like take it down. So like you need to go on and like spread the word kind of thing, as I kind of am stealing the line from the Independence Day, where once they beat the aliens, we of course have uh, the president who's going on and telling the guys like, yeah, we beat it, like spread the word. And everybody's like, yeah, did like uh, with the god the Morse code. So Peter and Manny go out with the gland juice, and so Peter ends up going on to try to cross these wires, and it seems that things are working. And Manny goes off to, I guess, like keep watch or hold guard. And then all of a sudden, Manny is to hear Chewie off in the distance. So Manny's like, "Hey, I should go and find where Chewie is." So Manny is calling for Chewie, and Susan realizes that Manny may be in danger. So Susan ends up going after Manny and realizing that Manny's dead. So now Chewie is there, and so Susan is trying to protect Chewie, and she ends up kind of putting the gland on him. So Leon had gone and told Susan, "Hey, like no matter what happens, like if this train just starts rolling as soon as we just uh, like put this power back on, and like I'm like make sure that you end up getting back here so we can all get out of here." And so Susan's like, "Okay, like I gotcha." So the train ends up coming back on, and Leon all of a sudden, once his train starts rolling, Leon tries to like fix something, and come to find out that all of a sudden is to rip open his wounds even more to where he's really starting to bleed. And now he's realizing it's like, oh crap, like these things are going to come for me. And so that will leave the train to have these monsters want to come for it. So Leon just starts to walk off, and he's now singing this song to lure all of these Long John things to him. And so he has this gun, so he's just trying to fire off as much as he can, but he's realizing he's going to die soon. He's going to get killed. So we end up, instead of using the train to get them out of there, instead we just have Susan, Peter, and Chewie, who all decide to get out of there in another way, because Peter ends up going on to uh, take Susan and Chewie and run them to this little uh, kind of dumbwaiter or little small like kind of pulley system to get them to a higher location to help them try to get the heck out of there. And while Susan and Chewie end up going in this kind of little elevator like thing, this little pulley elevator system, we all of a sudden find that one of the Long John things are coming after them. And so Susan is to figure out a way to perfectly like have this piece of wood like stall her from having this little little chain elevator fall back down. So by the time that Susan gets out of there, she then ends up kicking this wood piece to have the Long John like fall quickly and fall to its death and crush it and kill it. So now we have Peter that is by himself because he realized he needed to uh separate from them to be like the decoy to give both Susan and Chewie time to get out of there. So Peter ends up going to this location where there's a bunch of gas, where Peter is now breaking off all of these gas uh, levers or levers, however you want to pronounce that. And Peter is to now try to go on and try to light this lighter while all the monsters are kind of gathering further and further around him. And he's just like, okay, this lighter freaking sucks. So Peter has to forcibly ditch the lighter, and so instead he ends up trying to like spark like some kind of thing within this room, so this gas will explode. And so now Peter is taking this crowbar and trying to like smash it against this metal ground, and it makes a spark, and conveniently Peter is to fall into this water to avoid exploding with all of the other bugs, with all the other long johns, or all the insects. So, oh, and the kids ended up finding that little egg sack, and like they ended up kind of regretting it afterwards, but it is what it is. That's what happens when you go in there and wanting $40 or whatever. We also, like, the main reason why I wanted to compare this to Chud was when Leon, Josh, and Peter were making their way through the subway station. Leon was to mention that a lot of the subway station was there for like the homeless. But then all of a sudden, a number of the homeless were to all vanish for some reason, or were to get scared down there. And like so much about this was like, this seems just like Chud. Because of course, we would have homeless people who would end up kind of living in the subway station, or would go into the sewers, and come to find out, like, the homeless people, the further and further that they would stay in the sewers, all of a sudden would become radioactive, and they would end up becoming chuds because of all of the radioactive materials that the government just dumped down there for a long period of time without anybody knowing, creating freaks. So, but anyways, back to this movie. So, Susan and Chewie end up seeing this massive explosion, and like all of these sewer tops go flying off, and explosions and all these cool effects. Everybody's like, oh my god, what's going on? So Susan and Chewie meet up with Dr. Gates, and so Gates is to mention, it's like, well, yeah, I guess you've gone on and figured out a way to like wipe out every single one of these monsters, these insects. You've killed them all off. And Susan is like, well, like, could it be possible that one could have survived on our side? And we're immediately having her assess, like, well, hey, is Peter still alive? Because he was down there. And then the next thing that we know Peter ends up showing up and he's like, yeah, I'm still alive. It's like, oh, okay, great, yeah, all right. So we'd naturally assume that Susan, Peter, and Chewie are all going to be a family after this. And, like, really, that's how the movie just kind of, like, ends with this kind of happy ending. And really, we don't have, like, the villain side that's like, oh no, there's one nest that you didn't realize is still out there, or something like that, to give us a possible sequel. As if goofy enough that this movie was to think there was going to be one, which there ends up being multiple sequels to this film, oddly enough. So, with that said, I don't really I don't really quite understand why this movie is to be called Mimic, but technically, when you look at it, you have the monster that is to be wearing this like trench coat, and he has technically this uh this kind of masking thing that looks like a human face. But so yeah, so I think that mainly covers most of this film. Really tried to rush through it, but at the end of the day, also I feel that for the most part, I got most of the deets down. So I'm gonna go on and get out of here. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Mimic. Whether you hated this movie, whether you liked this movie, whether you saw it when it was originally released in 1997 because they had nothing better to do for whatever reason. Again, this is another insect goop movie. So yeah, I don't know what it is with horror movies and how they love their goop for some goofy reason. Why is it that they always have to have slime and I guess Nickelodeon will tell you it's like, well, no, kids just like slime, but like, does this appeal to a kid's audience? I don't really think it does. Um, but anyways, with that said, I'm gonna go on and just get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.